Hollow core optical fiber is having a moment, which is quite a statement considering the relative nascence of this technology. With transformative potential to invigorate and ultimately transform optical networking, hollow core fiber's time is now. Current and anticipated data demands make this technology not only coveted, but entirely necessary. It should come as no surprise, given the technology's potential, that some of the industry's top minds are embracing this latest trend in optical fiber. The fiber space is a unique one, even among photonics technologies. Its industrial implications are perhaps better characterized as societal. Jason Eichenholz is one photonics luminary who is familiar with this dynamic. The serial entrepreneur is behind some of the most publicized spectroscopic instrumentation ever developed, though you'll have to head into orbit for a chance to see it. And as a co-founder and CTO of Luminar, Eichenholz served as something of a human link between the wonder of self-driving transportation and pure photonic innovation. Eichenholz's latest journey is in the burgeoning hollow core fiber space as founder and CEO of Central Florida-based Relativity Networks. In a conversation with Photonic Spectrum managing editor Jake Saltzman, Eichenholz overviews the opportunity in front of Relativity Networks and its technology. It is an opportunity that Eichenholz says has not only sparked his latest venture, but that could reshape how the world manages information. This is Spotlight from All Things Photonics, featuring intimate sit-down conversations with preeminent figures in our industry. Unscripted, timely, and topical, this series shines the spotlight on industry-leading changemakers from all corners of the photonics landscape, from the gateways of progress to the most impactful challenges of our time.
Today's episode is brought to you by Hamamatsu Corporation, a leading manufacturer of devices for the generation and measurement of infrared, visible, UV light, and X-rays. Hamamatsu is dedicated to the advancement of photonics through extensive research and offers specialized systems for select applications. Visit hamamatsu.com to learn more.
Today's episode is also brought to you by American Elements, the world's leading manufacturer of engineered and advanced materials. With a catalog of over 35,000 products available in both industrial bulk and laboratory quantities. To learn more, visit AmericanElements.com. American Elements. Now invent.
So looking forward to this because we're with a bona fide optics and photonics luminary today, Jason Eichenholz. And I want to start in the past. I want to ask you about the last year and a half for you and what that's been like as you've transitioned from one facet of your life in optics and photonics to this new chapter.
Jake, thanks for having me on the podcast and coming back again. It's really great. Yeah, so I thought after Luminar that I would be, I'd say, going from my chapter 3, which is reputation building, to legacy building and building Jonathan's Landing, which it's interesting. I go to photonics conferences now, and that's all people talking about. You see it on LinkedIn and all the things going on there. And I really thought that's what I would be doing. And I got approached by some of the leadership at the University of Central Florida and Rodrigo Amezcua, my co-founder, to start talking about hollow core fiber, and he had these ideas for a company. Okay, that'd be interesting. I coach and mentor entrepreneurs all the time.
That's right.
I'd be thrilled to go do that. And so I'm coaching and mentoring Rodrigo, and I'm realizing how big an opportunity hollow core fiber is. And the funny thing is, I brought the NKT hollow core fiber into the Newport catalog back in 2004. Wrote a trade magazine article about it, did all the data sheets. And so I was familiar with hollow core fiber. We were talking about going from one, table to another for multi-photon microscopy, like 3 meters of fiber. And when I realized we could do per kilometer what we were doing per meter in loss with this next generation anti-resonant fiber, and I realized how big the market opportunity was, I couldn't sit this one out. It was too hard to sit out. And for me, what I'm seeing is hollow core fiber is the single largest transformation to telecommunications in probably 50 years. Just the losses of the fiber are so much lower. The ability to go through air with latency, with lower 1000x lower nonlinearities, lower chromatic dispersion, and new wavelength bands being opened up. It's so funny that, okay, that's great. But when you then do a Venn diagram and overlap now an industrial revolution scale seismic shift in society for AI, and you're able to apply brand new technology to a market that's insatiable, I, I came out of retirement.
So you're not sitting under a rock, though. Neither is Rodrigo. For those who don't know Rodrigo, he's fairly established, certainly in the research domain out at UCF with his work in fiber. So you know the opportunity, and you know some of the ins and outs, the core of the technology. That's probably not the right use of core, but
Right?
um,
I think it's perfect, actually.
yeah, it is apt. Um, do you recall the moment where you sort of pieced it together, knowing that you can take this technology where there's improvement happening in terms of the fiber, but also to meet the distinct needs of current and anticipated data demands in this AI age?
when when we started talking about the company and the value proposition, we thought it was about finding less expensive land. You move out of London and you go up to Oxford, or you move out of New York City and you go to Hoboken. And what I realized, and we realized, is very, very quickly, it was not about land per se, the price of the per acre per land. It was about the lack of power and the insatiable demand for power and for data centers. And when we realized how important hollow core fiber was to open up the geographic optionality to site data centers for AI and computing in the cloud, it was an immediate, oh, kind of a oh my moment. And we realized that, okay, we're going to go all in on this. And that's when I really decided to come on board as CEO and start the company.
So you use words, and I think they're fair, like unlimited opportunity, insatiable data demands. Photonics, though, is in some extent, or to some extent, you got to be able to quantify the opportunity. And even if you don't use numbers, you have to be able sometimes to explain the opportunity. How do you do that other than unsatiable or insatiable and unlimited?
So look, I'm a tech entrepreneur. I'm always pitching, the business opportunity. For self-driving cars, you had to pitch a market that didn't exist. For Uber had to pitch transportation as a service to people who didn't understand it. Airbnb is pitching, having strangers stay in your home. Right? You're pitching markets that don't exist, and that's what I've done throughout my entire career. I've yet to find an investor that says, "Yeah, I don't know if you're going to sell anything. Like, I don't know if the customer's going to buy it." We had market channel fit and a purchase order for fiber before we had any employees. So there is no, this is the first time in my career that I haven't had to justify the market and prove the market. That's why I left companies like Newport and Ocean Optics is I got frustrated having to prove that the market didn't that the market existed, because I couldn't go find a market report to show what percentage of the market, what would be serviceable available market, what's the total available market. Here's what I know, Jake. It's very simple. I'm going to sell every kilometer of fiber I can make. That's the pitch, and I could probably do it 3 times over.
I won't put you on the spot on that. I will put you on the spot with this, though. Explain HCF to our audience with the caveat that, generally speaking, our listeners are going to have some idea of what it is you're talking about.
Right. So a traditional optical fiber uses 2 different indices of refraction pieces of glass. It's a solid piece of glass, your total internal reflection inside that fiber. Light goes down the fiber and it goes tens, hundreds of kilometers down the fiber and operates under total internal reflection. In 1961, Cal got a Nobel Prize in physics for low loss fiber. 1961. Fundamentally, optical fiber hasn't changed since then. What we do is we use basically a series of tubes in glass tubes with an air core, and we inflate those tubes as we pull and draw an optical fiber, and light propagates via air held in place by these anti-resonant tubes. So it's an air core glass fiber. So the core is air surrounded by glass. And so you get all the attributes of an optical fiber. You can bend it and do all these things. At the same time, you get the fact that light travels at the full speed of light, a little under 300,000 kilometers a second. Whereas in glass, due to the index of refraction being about 1.47, you travel 47% slower inside a glass fiber.
You mentioned that fiber fundamentally is an unchanged technology, a very established technology. Certainly, since 2004, when your microscopy themed endeavors were taking place. But there are other technologies to note here. You don't have to go far to begin to think about sensor considerations. Certainly, the underlying data demands are in play here. Just in the broader ecosystem, what has happened in the last 3, 5, 1 year to further establish this opportunity for hollow core fiber?
Yeah, so in the 1980s, there was a lot of work to bring down up losses in optical fiber again each year, but there's a fundamental limit in how low you're going to get it. The excitement in 2004 was on something called photonic bandgap fiber. It was a hollow core fiber, photonic bandgap. It was really exciting, but fundamentally you couldn't get the losses down to the some dB per meter levels. The technology out of the University of Southampton with hollow core fiber and these anti-resonant fibers and NAMF and DAMF, and they really were pioneers in this space. And they showed that you can make these fibers, you can get the losses down, you get the losses lower than traditional fiber, and the advantages of hollow core. And so they really showed that this next class of anti-resonant fibers would be the next big thing. And we've been chasing that technology as an industry since then. And I really got to give them credit for what they've done.
Talking about relativity networks, and we mentioned Rodrigo earlier, and you just mentioned Southampton. There's a spin out there who's undertaking this work. It's a massive opportunity, but it's also a big challenge. From the perspective of a company, a single company, how do you begin to put some of this into context to move towards deployable solutions from unlimited opportunity?
That's a great question. And I think the way you said it is exactly right. Spot on. Deployable solutions. That's what customers really care about. They don't care about buying fiber. They want it cabled. They want connectors. They want how you connect in, and for a technical term, they care about how do you put the goes-ins and the goes-outas of the lasers, the transponders, the transceivers, all that. They care about all that. And so it's a new world in terms of operating with hollow core fiber. And it's a little scary for some of these big companies. They want to try it out. They try it. It works. Fortunately, the University of Southampton spin out, Luminicity, did a lot. Microsoft acquired them a couple of years ago. They're now captive for Microsoft, which created this void in the market that we're filling. And what we've decided from day one is that we will be the leading at-scale provider. And to do that, we're going to go right back to what I did at Open Photonics years and years ago. At the start of my relaunch my entrepreneurial career is focusing on bringing in the right partners to go do this. And so what that means, Jake, is one, we've got Prysmian, an 18 billion euro market cap company. I met with them last night while here up in New York City. We're talking about how important hollow core fiber is. Customers are demanding it. And now I've got a very large company with decades of experience making fiber optics, helping us scale the fiber and the cabling. And that's just as important as the fiber itself. Obviously, without the fiber, cabling doesn't matter. But if you have a hollow core fiber and you can't produce a 16, 32, 96 core fiber, 96 fibers, 24 fibers plus standard fiber in a cable, and run it through a conduit, run it through a microduct, you don't have a product. And so we bet our company, Relativity Networks, that we can teach Prysmian how to make our fiber and scale faster than if we were to do it alone. And that was plan for luminosity. They scaled them, they vertically integrated, but they had a lot more resources and a lot more time. This market is exploding. So the fiber and the cable scaling, check. Then we have trusted installation partners coming, that people who have worked with hollow core fiber, they know how to deploy it, they know how to get the cables through microducts, and they have all those customers that Luminosity was interested in speaking to and sort of seeded the market for us.
Yep.
And then the last thing, and this is as important, and this will be the sort of the third phase for us, is ensuring that we fully leverage the fiber by developing high power amplifiers, new wavelength sources, new transceivers, new amplifiers to take advantage of the wider wavelength range, lower chromatic dispersion, lower nonlinearities. We can launch a lot more power down the fiber from the GOZINZAs, so you don't have to put an inline amplifier uh, between the 2 points. You can hopefully do that while you're in the plant, and that costs a lot of money for people. So fiber, cable, installation, mode field adapters, connectors, we make it seamless for people and the people to go install it and have the network design. All of that we can take care of, which is why we're called Relativity Networks and not Relativity Fiber.
When we saw that Relativity Networks had raised, I believe first it was 4 point something million, and then a second follow up round with 6.1. We sort of in the photonics media community thought, oh, here's Jason Eichenholz again doing something that will blow our minds either now or in years' time, and that's true. In terms of where the company is now, Relativity Networks, you mentioned these different phases. Where is the company now in terms of where we'll end up down the road?
So we are, lack of a better pun, sorry, laser focused on scaling the manufacturing. As we said, we have that insatiable demand. We have customers who we know will buy the fiber when we can go produce it at scale, and that's our focus. And so Rodrigo, who's an absolute genius in this space, he's actually in Eindhoven, Netherlands. Just spoke to him right before this call, before the podcast, and he's there trying to go get these towers, turned on and producing, hundreds and thousands of kilometers of hollow core fiber.
Relativity Networks is a photonics company, right? You're speaking a photonics language here on this call, on the podcast. But that might not be the best descriptor, the best label for this company. And in some ways, that's a departure for you, right? You're a photonics guy. You have been for a long time. So you're playing in a new pool. Does that change how you network, how you fundraise, how you pitch the technology? Has this been a new endeavor for you in that sense?
No, this is actually, it's a really good question. No, it's fundamentally the exact same thing I did at Luminar, where we took photonics technology and we applied it to the automotive industry. This is no different than we're taking photonics technology and applying it to the data center, AI, computing in the cloud, telecommunications space. And so it's the same that we've done, which is no different than I did in 2000 doing MEMS testing for telecom. What I think most people miss in the photonics industry is, if you're in the photonics industry and you're selling to other photonics people, you're missing the larger market opportunity. It's when you're selling photonics products into markets, whether it's healthcare, medicine, telecommunications, transportation, infrastructure, lighting, whatever it is, applying photonics is what I've really loved to do throughout my entire career, whether it's sending a spectrometer to Mars to measure rocks being zapped by lasers.
Yeah, that's not an example. You've done that.
Yes, I've done. Yes, my teams have done that. Yes, our blood analyzers for bilirubin, or trace looking for explosives on the battlefield in Afghanistan right after 9/11. Like all sorts of things that are way ahead of the curve. What I love about photonics is deploying technology that makes the world better and safer, or allows us to do communications, or unlock an industrial revolution scale seismic shift in society. That's what gets me out of bed. That's my personal mantra. Why not change the world? I don't know how to change the world and sit out such a big opportunity. And that's why I jumped back into the entrepreneurship ring.
So you mentioned this notion of working for or pitching to external markets, and obviously there's big opportunity when you do that compared to internal markets. Something like a trade show then creates an interesting dynamic. And of course, we're on the verge of ECOC, and you couldn't get a coffee at OFC earlier this year without talking about hollow core fiber. Um, how does that dynamic work for you? Because this may not be for lack of a better phrase, a Photonics West company.
Correct. It's different. So look, at Photonics West, I can't go more than half an aisle down the trade show without bumping into somebody who I know. And the good news is when you go to OFC, Rodrigo can't go more than half an aisle. Somebody who he knows, and then it takes me 2 aisles. It's fundamentally when you're raising capital, the investors are looking at the market opportunity, but way more important than the market opportunity is the team. Can the team execute? Do they have a track record of executing? And we've assembled a phenomenal team of engineers, scientists, program managers, field technicians. They're going to propel the company forward. And when you overlap that with the track record of raising $1 billion and growing a company from 2 people to 1,000 people and going public on NASDAQ, and it's relatively, easy to raise capital.
Was doing some math here before the podcast, and it was about a 7-week period this summer, and you had 7 companies: QAnt, Quix, Quantum, Erigo, Terramount, EFOS, Xlight, and Relativity Networks, collectively raising about $260 million, and that is a significant amount of money. But everyone fundraises differently and sort of views the notion of early stage fundraising differently. I want to ask you about your thoughts on early stage fundraising. Is securing the capital, obviously that's important. That is the goal. But is there more there? Is there an essence of getting the word out that matters just as much, or maybe even more?
Well, I learned a lot about fundraising at Luminar, an awful lot. And it was a great experience, how to come out of stealth, how to go really spread the message. Our PR firm method is fantastic in helping us do that. We really, I most engineers and scientists don't understand the value of channel. I learned a ton working for Newport and Spectrophysics on the value of channel. I learned, that's how I made a lot of the connections in the industry. I learned a ton from Ocean Optics that pretty much outmarketed, I believe, every company in the industry in terms of from a name recognition per number of employees that was off the charts. PR and marketing is incredibly important for fundraising. It doesn't mean anything if your data sheet, doesn't hit the specs that you need for your customers. So the technology is important as well. Fundraising is relatively easy with a good track record of having done something big before, and we've got big plans. So those, by the way, those are just some of the companies that have raised capital. There are other photonics companies that are doing inside data center stuff that are they're raising a lot more than that. So there's a lot of money going into this space. Capital is readily available to be deployed, especially if you're in a hot space like AI and can show a value proposition there.
When you're in the throes of building a company or a product or a solution, do you ever step back and allow yourself to view the current endeavor in the context of your life in photonics?
I do. And in fact, it's not so much life. I don't really think about my life in photonics. And the reason for that, Jake, is I don't have anything to prove and I don't have anything to accomplish. I'm a fellow in SPIE and OSA or Optica. I've about 100 patents, this huge patent wall at Luminar. It's my business legacy. Raised a lot of money, went public on NASDAQ. I'm done. I don't have anything to prove. So I get to come at this unencumbered by that and with a bit of confidence because I've seen this playbook before and I've run this playbook before. It's just slightly different. So I don't think about it as the context of Jason Eichenholz. That's not me, and anyone who knows me knows I don't think about that way. But what I have to do is I have to make I've had to make the transition, of going from CTO and technical lead and a lot of operations and all that stuff to CEO. And the best analogy I heard for that, and it will directly answer your question, is I've had to transition from that technical lead role to the CEO role. So my job from the organization is to look out and up. What's going on? My team's job is to look down and in. And that's the transition that I'm kind of working through. I'm wanting to jump on conference calls. I love the technology stuff. I want to get in there, and I can't. It's meeting with investors, it's meeting with customers, it's going to technical conferences or business conferences and presenting. And that's what I have to do, not go solve the technical problems. But I can only do that because I've hired an incredibly talented team inside Relativity that are really, really good and smarter than me at the technical problems and I know they've got this, and I'm empowering them to do so.
Let me ask you this then. What is the relationship that you've endeavored to build in optics and photonics? Put that in the context of some of your other pursuits, because it creates a multifaceted legacy. And I don't mean for this to be necessarily a legacy question, right? You're in New York City, you're working, but there's a lot going on that builds the person here.
Yeah. So I can say this, call it a proclamation or a prediction. My hope is that my biggest legacy will not be in the photonics space. My hope is that my biggest legacy will be what I've done to transform the lives of countless adults with autism in providing meaningful employment, meaningful housing, living a life of dignity and purpose, and transforming how we think about the not-for-profit space. That's what I hope my biggest legacy will be. I view the photonic stuff as is my home. Like these are my people. I go to Photonics West. I go to OFC. I'm like, it's one of my favorite weeks here, right? I love seeing people. But when I walk, and this is how I know this prediction is going to be true. When I walk the floors of Photonics West and I bump into people, or even in Orlando where I live, it used to be, oh, I love what you were doing with Luminar. I love that, I saw your LinkedIn post. It's now 90%. I love what you're doing with Jonathan's Landing. I love what you're doing for your son. I love the legacy that you're creating. And so if I do what I hope happens right, that will be my legacy. And it'll be seeded and funded and supported by a continuous amount of accomplishments and successes in the photonics space. That's my hope. I hope that answered your question.
It absolutely does, and I almost feel bad about bouncing around between technology and broader context themes here. I do want to ask you though, just about, and this can be an HCF question or it can be something bigger than that. The primary bottleneck that's always of mind. That's always in the purview of someone in the field. What's the bottleneck that you are now aiming to overcome? Is it something in AI and data demands, or is it something that's more specific just to fiber, or is it something that I'm way off on?
So, no, you're spot on. The problem that we're trying to solve is the fact that the demand for AI and compute in the cloud far exceeds the compute that's available. And the compute is not available because there's not enough data centers and not enough GPUs running. And the reason that that's the problem is there's not enough power. Fundamentally, there's not enough power. You've got Meta. I'm sitting here in Manhattan. Meta saying they're going to build a data center the size of Manhattan, and they overlay it with Manhattan, but you're certainly not going to put that data center here in Manhattan. And oh, by the way, it requires a nuclear power plant to run it. And so what happened sometime between our friends and family round and our seed round, after I put my first dollars into the company and seeded it. Something between those two things, Microsoft bought 3 Mile Island. If you and I were doing this podcast a year ago, and I said, oh yeah, I think the hyperscalers are going to get into the power business, you would have laughed me off the podcast, and my investors would have laughed me out of the room. But we told them we saw this problem percolating. I didn't realize that Amazon and Microsoft would be buying nuclear power plants and doing behind the meter deals because of the lack of power. That Elon Musk would be shipping a gas generation plant from Europe piece by piece and putting it back together. All of that is a seismic shift in the need for power. And when we are selling effectively, we're selling time. One, time down the pipe, lower latency. And two, that we can help our customers turn on a data center 2 years earlier because we can move the data center to where the power is or will be. That's huge. And so that's the problem that we're solving, is the need for computing to support this AI revolution that's coming. A hollow core fiber is a mechanism to go do so if you can deploy it correctly. And 5G, 6G rollouts because of lower latency and extending the metro edge due to lower latency and less dispersion and directed energy and all these other applications that you can use hollow core fiber for. But the thing that's really going to move the needle, the reason why we're able to raise capital is because the market is so large just for data centers and AI.
Jason Eichenholz with us on the All Things Photonics podcast. And that example, I guess that look back to Microsoft and 3 Mile Island now versus what it would have been a year ago, bring us to the point that an entirely AI-driven digital economy doesn't really have an established template, right? That is a new thing for society, and there's probably some fright there. What excites you, though, about enabling society's ability to optimize how such economy would function, would operate?
I'm actually, look, the AI economy and there's a lot of people way smarter than me that are trying to quantify the dollar impact or what it could be. What I'm excited about is the use of AI and new AI techniques to go find cancer from MRIs or imaging modalities or the applied uses for AI into the science and technology field that I know. It's not about running a business more efficiency to get a 2% improvement in your shipping costs or things like that. And all that's great. And by the way, that's keeping these data centers going, as is, this, what you and I are doing. The data from this podcast will be stored in the cloud somewhere, not on your server, at your company. It's somewhere in the cloud. All that is happening. This is not about being able to stream Netflix or YouTube a little bit faster. This is about enabling businesses to move things in the cloud or do, for me, transformational society changes. Discovering new things about cosmology, in the stars, or unlocking quantum computing. That's what I'm really bullish and excited about. Or it's the applications of AI, predicting weather systems or harnessing energy more effectively, all those things. And oh, by the way, while that's happening and while there's this huge demand for AI and AI compute, we're also getting new next generation nuclear power plants being developed because now there's money to go do that. So we can start improving, our carbon footprint as a society because we've got cleaner power coming. So all of these society changes are coming. And I used to joke and as saying in the automotive space, and I went to a automotive conference and I gave a keynote talk. I was presenting about LiDAR and the future of autonomy and future of the automotive industry. And I said, it's so great to have a front row seat to such a large change. And a very large auto exec pulled me aside after and he said, Jason, I don't think you understand. You're not in the front row. You're on the bus. You're leading us in a new direction. And I think the same thing holds true for a very small company like Relativity Networks. We can punch way above our weight class and have huge impact to an industry by bringing revolutionary technology and figuring out how to deploy it and how to bring it to market. And if I look at anything, Jake, that will be my legacy within the photonics industry, is that I brought technology out of the R&D lab and work with my teams to figure out how to go bring it to market.
Jason Eichenholz, our guest on this episode of Spotlight by All Things Photonics. Jason, always a pleasure to catch up. I hope we see you in the magazine here in 2026. Have a great fall, and we'll check in again soon.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you.